Hi, everyone. Welcome back to a new episode of the new Unfiltered. I have been so excited to get back into recording with so many guests. Some of you have reached out about upcoming guests, and I'm definitely tailoring this new chapter of the new Unfiltered to be a little bit more, I don't want to say like upscale with my guests, but a little bit more specific with the level of experience a lot of these guests have. You guys will probably notice that from past episodes, I've had a lot of people just across the board sharing their stories. And I was really keen to tailor this to specific entrepreneurs who not only really inspire me, but I think have the insight and the knowledge and the experience to guide you guys to being your most unfiltered and fearless selves. So today I have Renee Rouleau. She is a trusted and sought after skincare expert and esthetician, loved by celebrities, editors, influencers, and skincare obsessives everywhere. She doesn't have a studio anymore, besides for celebrities in Austin or LA. But I just told her the next time if she ever opens another one up, I always love a good facial. So Renee, thank you so much for coming on today. Moved to Austin 3 years ago from LA, and I'm thinking about going back to LA. But one of the reasons I love Austin is that it has that small town feel, but it also really lacks in a lot of kind of like the beauty element. So I'm curious your backstory, what drew you to Austin and how you even made a footprint in this market of skincare.
Yeah, so my background being an esthetician started. My mom used to give facials. My grandmother owned a hair salon. So I grew up kind of around beauty all the time. So I started my career outside of Boston, became an esthetician right out of high school when I was 19, 18, whatever. Opened my first skincare salon at age 21 in Boston. I had that until age 26. Then I decided that I was tired of shoveling and it was too cold up in Boston and I just wanted to try something new. So I sold my half of the company and started Renee Rouleau Skincare in 1996 in Dallas, Texas. And the reason why I moved to Dallas was, for personal reasons. I liked country music at the time and I just heard so many great things about Texas. But Texas people are very appearance oriented, and being in the appearance industry certainly made sense. And then 8 years ago, me and my now late husband, we relocated Renee Rouleau Skincare to Austin, Texas. So our corporate headquarters are here, our warehouse distribution. But yeah, at the end of the day, Texas people, they love to look good, feel good, and they love to do it all. So Texas is a great place for beauty.
I love that. I love that you say Texas people like to do it all because I think a lot of people assume like they're in the South. These people are sometimes like very backwards and very country, but Dallas and Austin in particular are definitely super cultured. So
Yeah.
when your mom, I'm assuming, gave you your first facial, did you feel any certain kind of way? I mean, can you put one word on what that felt like?
Well, no, so my grandmother owned a hair salon, but my mom used to always get facials.
Got
So
it.
like as a child, like this is back when like no one even knew what an esthetician was, but there happened to be a place and there was this woman that gave her facials. And so she used to always come home after having had a facial, and that was really impressionable on me. I was like, a facial? Wow, what's that? Because this would have been early 80s and like no one was getting facials then. So my mom just, again, growing up with her mother in the beauty business, she was always very beauty focused.
So did you immediately open a spa or start doing it on your friends? Kind of like how Allie Webb started Dry Bar. She was just practicing hair on her friends.
So I was growing up. I was the first person in my class in fifth grade to wear makeup. So I didn't even know about that. I didn't realize that until I went to like a high school reunion and someone's like, "Oh yeah, Renee, you were the first girl to wear makeup." I was like, "Oh really?" And I was just always really into beauty. And then in high school, I used to with like sleepovers, I'd always be the girl that was doing everyone's makeup. So just always into beauty. And my desire for skin was, I really got more fascinated with like the skin science of it and ingredients. And it just, I liked touching people and knowing that like what the power of touch is. And yeah. And so I've been an esthetician for over 35 years, and Renee Rouleau Skincare will celebrate 27 years next week.
Oh my gosh. Well, congratulations. That's quite an achievement. And for, a lot of like young women who are listening to this, do you have any specific tips for how we can start taking care of our skin better, or things you wish you had done that you didn't do in your early 20s in relation to skincare?
Yeah, I think, I mean, obviously we all know to wear sunscreen every day, right? That's the most important thing. That was not the thought process when I started out. I mean, it was always like, oh, well, first of all, like, certainly, you know, in the early 80s and certainly long before then, and was good. It was like, it was like a healthy glow. And then later on, of course, they realized like, oh wow, actually that's causing wrinkles.
Mhm.
But for many, many years, people didn't know to wear like a sunscreen in their moisturizer. It was always like, oh, if you go to the beach, if you go to the lake, then wear sunscreen when you're outdoors. And I feel like most people now wear a sunscreen either in their foundation or tinted moisturizer. So I think that daily wear of sun protection is really important. But generally, I mean, I have a lot of very like specific thoughts on a lot of things, but the highest level, what I think good skin is one, having, to me, someone who has great looking skin, it's not a face that is free from lines and wrinkles, or loss of tone. It's more about skin texture. I'm really into texture. So texture means, not having bumps on the skin, not have, anything that's raised. So skin growths we get with, age, skin tags, things like that, clogged pores, you can't cover that up with makeup, making the skin look as even toned as possible. So like, sunspots, discoloration from breakouts. I mean, I know all this is easier said than done to get rid of, but, and then lastly, having the tiniest pores possible. And you can do that with long-term use of retinol and retinoid. So to me, I just think texture, like a really smooth texture, is what I think beautiful skin is.
And is there one way that you think someone in their 20s, like one thing everyone should be doing besides, I mean, sunscreen's obviously incredible, but I feel like at this point, because of the internet, everyone's like, oh my gosh, sunscreen. What else is there that like I could be doing at 25 that'll give me your skin at whatever age you are, unless you're also 25?
Well, I will be 54 next week. But
Yeah, you're amazing.
I would say, I wouldn't say it's like one magic thing. I think in general, what it's about just having good skincare habits, right? We all want one magic secret. If you use this, it's going to be great. And yeah, of course, there's those hero products, hero ingredients, but I think it's just really committing to a good routine, and staying consistent with it. But when I think about my skin at age 54, I've been using acids since the early 90s. So I've been using acids for 30 years. So, back then they were, I mean, I've burnt my face more times than I care to remember because they were really not stable back then. And, I was kind of my own guinea pig. But there's so many great exfoliating acids. Like we have our triple berry smoothing peel, which is incredible. Use that once a week. But anything with glycolic, salicylic, if you have clogged pores and acne, lactic acid, mandelic, I mean, all the things. But I think regular use of exfoliating acids will really smooth the texture. And then getting on a beginner's retinol, I wouldn't do, at age 25, I wouldn't get on a prescription at this point. But an over the, a nice over the counter, we have a great one in my line. But starting on retinol, I think, and is really helpful for kind of keeping that smooth texture. So yeah, so exfoliation on the surface with acids and kind of cell turnover from retinol on the inside. I think those two are really hero. And then vitamin C is always incredible as well.
I did used to take a vitamin C. I don't, well, not take it, but put it on my face. And I do remember it made
Both.
a difference. I'm really bad. I'll do something and then I'll be like, oh, I'm fine. I'll not do it for a week. And then I'll go back and I would assume that's probably not what you're supposed to do. But I then find myself, I'm like forgetting. So
Yeah.
you strike me as someone who has a very specific routine, but take me back to, so you said you sold part of this business, correct?
I had a skincare salon outside of Boston for 5 years. So that's where I was a full-time esthetician, service provider, and had that, from 1991 to 1996, and sold it to my business partner, and then to start kind of my own company and do my own thing in Dallas in 96.
Was there any fear going through your mind, at that time of, selling this part of your company and then taking it into a different area?
So it's funny because just a week ago, I was up in Boston and I had dinner with my former business partner. And, we're still really good friends, but I hadn't like seen her probably in about 3 years. And we were talking, and it was so long ago. I was 21 when I started that business with her. We were coworkers at a salon, and she was 13 years older than me. And she said she always wanted to open up her own business, but she didn't want to do it by herself. And so, because she had two young children, and her and I just were great coworkers. And she said, "Do you want to open up the skincare salon with me?" And her husband was a CPA, so he would run all the numbers. I was like, "Sure." But like I look back on it now, it's like I was 21 years old. Like, what did I know about owning a business? And so, but she took a chance on me. So when we had dinner, I said to her, I was 21. I was like,
Why?
what were you thinking? And we were very successful. But she just said, Renee, you always, the one thing she said about this was, she said, you always had so many ideas, but you actually executed them. She goes, I would blink and you would like have it done. And and that was, 30 years ago. And so I think about myself today and I'm like, I'm an executor. I don't just spin a million ideas in the air. I actually get it done. So I think that still holds true today. But then she says, anytime I tell anyone about, Renee, she says, I tell them you're courageous and fearless. And this is what she told me last week. And I said, oh, really? And because again, I don't, I'm just me. Right. And she said, yeah, she said, you've always just been super courageous, fearless. You do what you want. You don't care what anyone says. So to answer your question, Alexa, yeah, when I moved to Dallas, at age 26. I didn't know anyone. I just took a U-Haul, moved all by myself.
Mm.
I, started a skincare spa. I got my own contractors and architects and interior designers. Like did it all myself. I bootstrapped, which is still, today I still own 100% of my company, but I took the half that I got paid from selling, and then I took out a bank loan. And I mean, I yeah, I suppose I was probably, I don't know. I don't remember really being scared. I just remember always being that person when I want something, I just go after it and I get it. And now fast forward, and I think that's the nice thing about being young is like you are fearless, because you don't know any better. The world hasn't like been hard on you. And then when you get older, you're like, oh wow, like life is a little hard, or there's people out there I can't trust. But I would say, I mean, I ride a motorcycle, so like I'm pretty, I know what happens every time I ride a motorcycle. Like I know the risk, but I do it anyway. So I think that would probably be an example of, yeah, I'm probably not as, fearful as most people.
I wanna stay on that for a second because, like, my whole thing is inspiring, people to be fearless and get out of their comfort zone and learn these elements of how to be a fearless, especially founder. So do you think that that kind of a trait you have is something that you can learn? Is that something that, comes with experience and age, or is it something that is ingrained in someone from the beginning?
It's an excellent question, Alexa. So I think people come out of the womb being fearless. And I say that because we do a lot of personality profiling in our company, and everyone's just wired. And I think, the question is, is that environment? No, I think everybody just comes out a certain way. I mean, if you talk to any mother who has kids, like she'll tell you, oh my God, little Johnny, he was always the wild one. And guess what? He's still wild
You're
now.
so
So,
right.
so I do think it's like people come out of the womb. I think, but I also think birth order is a lot of it. So case in point, I'm the youngest of four children. And I've heard the expression, they say by the fourth kid, you let them juggle knives, right? So imagine a parent with a firstborn, right? They're totally all hands on deck. They're micromanaging. They're just like, because they're nervous, right? And so then they, are worried about, oh my gosh. Actually, I was just telling someone this yesterday. As the youngest of four, I can sleep through anything because by the time the fourth child comes, do you think they're going, ah, be quiet, Renee, the baby's sleeping? No, I had three older siblings that were running around. No one was being quiet for me, right? And I always think about like, it's it's kind of like parents, again, the firstborn versus the youngest. It's like, okay, the firstborn, this is a stove. It's very hot. Don't put your hand on it. And then, oh, okay. But by the fourth kid, I'm like, I put my hand on the stove. I'm like, ah. And they're like, well, now you know. Right. So I think there is like, by the fourth child, they give you a longer leash. And I think that I have read books on birth order before, and they say that the youngest child will always be the wildest and the most fearless because they had that longer leash from their parents, but they'll usually always be the most successful ones. And I think it's because they didn't have as much fear because they didn't grow up with people worrying about them so much.
What was your upbringing like in terms of siblings, in terms of your family supporting this dream? I mean, did you go to college?
So, I didn't go to college. My dad, grew up very humble. He paid his own way through college. Nobody in his family went through college. And as any parent wants, they want to give their child what they didn't have. And so a college education was something that, my family very much wanted us to have. And I was again, the wild child, the baby that just was fearless and did whatever I wanted to. And college was not my path. So in the high school that I went to, 99% of my high school class would go to college. And not only that, this was outside of Boston, and Boston's very academic. The year I graduated from high school, they had the largest amount of students in the history of the high school. It was a public high school, going to Ivy League schools. So like everybody was just totally smarty pants. And it was like me and the plumber. We were like the 1% that like didn't go to college. And I remember my guidance counselor, Mr. Ryan, I like when I met with him, he's like, okay, Renee, so what are you thinking about, for college? And I was just like, no, like, I don't want to do that. And I remember him like looking through this manual, being like, oh, wait, there's not anything in here, you know, for people who don't go to college. Like,
Mhm.
so I, you know, I just knew that college wasn't for me. I mean, in hindsight, I'm sure I have, ADHD and can't sit still. And I wasn't the best student. I love to socialize. And so, yeah, the thought of going to college just sounded miserable. Now, I do believe in education, but I can remain much more focused when it's something that I'm interested in. In this case, I became an esthetician right out of high school.
I think that college at this point is such an interesting topic. And I ask a lot of the founders I have on what they think about college because people are so in this day and age almost anti it. And I also didn't go, but I really struggled to pave my own way. But the one thing that I felt like I was always really good at was business and talking to people and kind of being my own boss. And I knew that from a young age. But I think a lot of young people, just because of social media, they think that they have this opportunity to get famous or really rich overnight, but they still don't have that trade the way that, for me, it was my brand. And for you, it was skincare. That really is the trade. It's the same as being a plumber, right? And they don't go to school. So would you say for
Right.
the average person who wants to potentially be an entrepreneur, doesn't have the idea yet and doesn't know what they want to do, should they still go to school?
So I think at the end of the day, education is important, right? And I think, when I think about college, I mean, I've never gone, I've gone to, friends partying on weekends, but that's basically all the college I know. Although I have taken several cosmetic chemistry courses at UCLA. So I do know that, but they were like week-long courses.
Mhm.
But I think, to me, my impression of college is when you don't really know what you want to do, and also maybe you're pressured into what your parents want from you, right? Like some people go because they're like, yeah, this is what my parents want. But I think if you don't really know what you want to do, it's a great way to expose you to lots of different things, right? And then it kind of, wow, I really like this class, I don't like that class. So I think it can kind of get you closer to the ultimate question, what do I want to be when I grow up, right? I happen to know what I wanted to do because I grew up in the beauty business and I always loved it. And so I consider myself, lucky for that. But I think, so then, like, case in point, like, I didn't go to business school, right? Yet I have a multi-million-dollar company. And when I'm around a lot of my colleagues that went to business school, they learned a lot, but like they will always say, like it can never teach you the real world of entrepreneurship, right? And but they're still getting education, right? And they have some education that I had to kind of learn on my own, maybe the hard way, or so I think at the end of the day, we're all learning, right? Wherever you get your education, whether it's college, business school, YouTube, having mentors that can teach you, reading books, what podcasts, whatever. It's just about learning. It just depends on, do you want to have school loans for a million years and learn that way?
I know. Do you want school loans for a million years and learn that way? Or do you want the debt that becoming an entrepreneur, gives you off the
That's
bat?
right.
Yeah. And there's
Yes.
no way, there's no way to really know. For someone though who is struggling with being their most fearless self and really is kind of scared of what people think, do you have any specific advice for them?
I mean, I think it's always, you have to really do what you want in this life, you do have to kind of block out the noise, and you have to just feel it in every bit of your bone and soul that you want this. It's like this deep desire that like keeps you awake at night. And if you have that eating at you, you just have to learn to block out that noise. I think but then you also have to learn to block out the people that aren't supportive of your dreams, right? And what I've kind of what I've kind of learned is that like I'm pretty particular about who I give my time to. Do you elevate me? Do you inspire me? Do like me, those are kind of my criteria, for like people I hang out with. Like, what's the value you bring to my life? And I'm going to very much try to bring value to other people's life. But I think that sometimes you have to let people go. If naysaying is good if they have true knowledge to tell you why something can't work because they have experience. But somebody naysaying because they're fearful and they're like, you're crazy. Like, what are you thinking? So a lot of people project their own fears onto you. And so if you're just super hell bent on this is your path, then sometimes you just have to tune those people out and walk away from friendships or relationships that don't really serve you, because you need people. Trust me, entrepreneurs so challenging, but you need people that constantly tell you you can do it and build you up. And I didn't ever have that. But I try to be that for my entrepreneur friends now.
I never really had that either. And I completely agree with, I think there's this like expectation or that people, assume that if you don't want to be friends with anyone anymore, you should just kind of like ghost them or stop talking to them. And I think that the more in tune you are with yourself, the more that you're strong enough to be able to say, I want to walk away from this friendship. And it's not a
Right.
selfish thing to do. So I really appreciate that you say that, because I wish more people talked about the pros, honestly, of like acknowledging this person doesn't bring anything beneficial to my life. I'm going to walk away.
Yeah. Well, and when I mentioned I moved to Dallas, the reason why I moved to Dallas when I was 26 was because when I was 21 and started that business, I now became an entrepreneur, right? Well, what were my friends at 21 doing? Going to college, partying, doing all of that. I had employees. Like, I'm responsible for people's livelihood. And so I grew up really quickly that way. And I had all these friends that were just like, "Oh, come on, let's go out and let's party." And I'm like, "No, like, I have this business," and I was very serious about business. And what happened for me, like living up in Boston, everybody's kind of from there. And it's kind of this mentality of like, you know, we've known each other since we were kids and everybody stays together. It's very hard to break into new circles. Like, if I haven't known you since out of the womb, I'm not going to be your friend. So people are like that in Boston. So I couldn't meet any new friends. I was like, all right, well, let me try to meet new friends and people that were very, professionals and very driven. And I couldn't meet anyone like that. And again, it's just hard to meet new people. And so that was why I left to Dallas, was because I knew that certain parts of Dallas, it was a big melting pot. People were from everywhere. So, like, kind of like in Austin, this, like, everyone's from everywhere. So it's easy to meet people because, no one's really, born and raised, at least in the downtown area. And so that's why I left Dallas, was because I needed to have a clean slate. I needed to let a lot of those relationships go, and not feel like I had to be obligated with someone to be friends with them because we've known each other for a long time, right? Like I needed to just be able to pick and choose my friends. So it was just really starting over, and it was great. And I'm still, best friends with a lot of my, high school friends. But I needed something more, and I needed to surround myself with people that were more like me.
I agree with what you said too, that it's just this inner feeling. Like if there is something waking you up in the middle of the night, or if there's this kind of like itch you have, I think there's no downside in going to explore it. And you're literal living proof that worked. You took the risk and you did it. And 26 years you're about to hit, right?
27. Mhm.
27. I mean, imagine if you hadn't just taken that fearless leap.
Yeah.
I yeah,
Yeah,
I mean,
I know.
it's wild, right? I think there's something so unique about entrepreneurs that they're able to overcome that fear, and that's how so many people go on to build something like you have.
Right. Yeah. No, 27 years. I'm like, what?
And you're rocking it way better than I did with my pink hair. It was way less cool than yours was or is. So thank you for keeping the pink cool. I remember when I first saw your Instagram, like when I first moved to Austin, I was like, oh my gosh, I need to meet this woman. I didn't have this podcast yet, but I did have pink hair at the time. And you really did. And you are currently inspiring me to bring it back. So thank you
Oh,
for that. So
nice. Oh, I
then,
wanted to touch also real quickly on when you say like how to become fearless. There's a really great book. I think his name is Ben Aldridge, but it's called 41 wild, something like 41 wacky ways to get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
wow.
And it's a really cool book. I think he's English, but the book gives you exercises like for these 41 ways. So
Yeah.
one of them is like taking a cold shower for 30 days straight. And another is like sleeping on a wood floor overnight. And there are all these like more, and there's a lot of like mental things as well, but it's a really good book to really get, to embrace being uncomfortable. And I think so for anyone who's like scared, it's a good thing to go through to do some of these fun things in this book, because getting uncomfortable doesn't mean that the guy's falling and something's bad. It just means it's out of your comfort zone. And the more that you exercise that muscle of being uncomfortable, then in business, there's times when things are uncomfortable and you don't have the answers and things feel scary, but you kind of have more like that mental power to be able to push through that. Because my favorite question I always say to myself is like, what's the worst case scenario? Right. And so anytime I'm fearful about something in my personal life, professional life, I'm like, what is the worst case scenario here? And when you really like break it down that way, you're like, okay, well, worst case scenario is that. But also the chance of that happening is, you also have to think the risk, right? And so like I had a conversation with one of my friends recently because she's like super worrier, and I'm just not like, I mean, I have some friends that don't worry at all. So I'm not that extreme, but I generally don't worry about things because I'm a good problem solver, and everything in life, you figure it out. But I said to her, she was worried about this one particular thing. And I said, it was with her kids or something. And I said, all right. She said, oh, I'm so worried about my son, blah, blah, blah. So he was going somewhere, whatever. And so I said to her, all right, your children are 18, 19. And of all the things in those 18, 19 years old of your kids, I go, what of all the things that you worried about with your kids, what percentage of things actually happened? So when you're awake at night, oh my God, he has his driver's license, he's going out, whatever. Of all the whole 19 years of your kids, like from birth, what percentage of all those worries came true? And she was like, well, I don't know. I go, well, throw out a number. I go, is it, 10%, 5%, 50%? So she said, oh, okay, probably 5%. And I was like, no, there's no way that 5% of the time, all the things you worry, I go, less than 1%. Let's just go with that. I go, if I went to Vegas with you and I said, here's $10,000, and you had less than 1% of a chance of winning that gamble, I was like, would you take it? And she's like, no. And I'm like, so why are you worrying about something that has less than 1% chance of it happening? So bottom line, always say to yourself, like, what's the worst case scenario? And always reflect back on everything in your life you worried about. And I guarantee you, next to any of that ever came true. So
I love that. I've learned that the hard way, because sometimes you literally have to sit in that anxiety. And then when what you thought was really bad happens, or when you're able to overcome it and it doesn't happen, I say that exact thing. But you literally are the definition of fearless. I mean, it's wild to me that you truly live with no fear. I think that's just remarkable. Where can everyone find out more about you? Buy the line, the website?
yes, thank you, Alexis. They can go to reneerouleau.com, sign up for our awesome emails. We have this incredible blog, and it has all these skin tips and skin education. And then Instagram Renee Rouleau, or Instagram Renee Rouleau Skincare.
Well, I will put everything in the show notes, as well as the book that you mentioned. Remind me one more time what it is.
Ben Aldridge, I think it's called, like, 41 Wacky Ways to Get Comfortable with, or to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, I think is what it is.
I keep one of those. I keep a book by Dale Carnegie on my table stand.
Yeah.
Like, not how to stay fearless, how to stop worrying and start living. So I think having those kind of books available 24/7 just to pick up and read when you're like, oh my gosh, what's going on?
Yeah.
It's nothing more than incredible. But you are incredible. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in to and we'll be back next week for a new episode of The New Unfiltered. So see you guys next week.